So our next speaker is Svenja Knappe from the University of Colorado, and she will present her work on high-density, full-head on-scalp MEG for epilepsy.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here. My name's Svenja Knappe, and my disclosures are that besides being a research professor at the University of Colorado, I'm also the founder and CTO of Fieldline. We have been developing a new sensor technology for magnetoencephalography, or MEG, and instead of it being based on superconductivity, it's based on laser spectroscopy of atoms. And so it doesn't need cryogenics. And so instead of having it housed in a big door, you can make small sensors and put these directly on the scalp of the subjects. And so it gives you a lot of the functionality of EEG in the sense that you can put it directly on the head, you can move around with it, you can get it closer to the brain, but it also retains advantages of MEG in that it gives you high spatial resolution and it's a contactless method. And so here's a picture of one of the early prototypes of our system. And so if we compare it to the existing MEG system, so here on the left, usually MEG consists of a really big door, that's that big red thing over there, filled with liquid helium, and then it has these superconducting sensors on the bottom, and you stick your head in there. And so this is the signal that you get for an auditory evoked field, so in response to a tone to the ear. And on the left, and if you do that same thing with these non-cryogenic sensors that we've been developing, we call them optically pumped magnetometers, or OPMs, then you get much higher signal amplitudes because you move much closer to the brain, independent of the head shape of the person. You can also see that the noise is somewhat higher. You can kind of see that back here. And so the current signal to noise of the two methods are very similar. And so this is a picture of the sensor. It's about the size of 2 sugar cubes, and you can measure all sorts of biomagnetic fields. But in our case, we put about 144 of these sensors on a helmet. On the right there, you see a picture of the helmet, and then you can move the sensors close to touch the head or get in close proximity. And in the background, you can actually see the SQUID MEG system sitting here. This is the installation in the lab of Professor Isabel Board. She's the director of an MEG center at Unmatched Medical Campus in Denver. And there they offer this novel type of MEG in addition to the traditional cryogenic MEG to the epilepsy patients that come for either functional mapping or kind of localization of the epileptic center. And so in the patients there, we follow the clinical workflow that they use on their epilepsy patients. So they put an EEG system in a 10-20 montage, and then on the head and then on top, they put the person into the MEG scanner and the cryogenic one. It's a supine measurement for about 30 minutes, and they ask the subject to try to sleep or at least rest. And so they're measuring the resting state activity. Then they digitize for co-registration purposes. They use head position indicator coils to digitize it, to digitize where the sensors are, the EEG sensors, and to co-register with the MRI image. We then wake up the patient and then give them a short break and then put them into the OPM MEG system and measure for another 30 minutes. And then we do another digitization. And at the end, we run a sensory paradigm. In this case, a somatosensory evoked fields as a sanity check, so to make sure we're localizing in the right areas. Up to date, we've measured 23 patients with these modalities. So this is how the raw signals look like. So here you see signal from 138 of these non-cryogenic sensors, and on the bottom right, you see the EEG. And then usually the epileptologist would flag where the interictal spikes happen in these patients and then localize where they see the activity with the MEG. And so if we compare those three modalities, the green dots is the location of the sensors with respect to the head, and then the color scheme is the magnetic field that these spikes produce. And so you can see a clear dipolar pattern. You can also see that the OPM sensors in the middle here are a lot closer to the head than the cryogenic sensors. And so as a result of that, you see that the activity shows up much more focal. And then here in the EEG, of course, we don't have a lot of sensors, but that is the standard clinical paradigm. We then, on the OPM data, run an automatic kurtosis beamformer to automatically find where those spikes happen and then localize those within the brain. And so you can see here, this is the raw data of one of these spikes in the on-scalp OPM system. You see it also in the EEG, and then the beamformer calculates a virtual electrode, how the activity would be seen if it was placed right into the cortex here. And then on these pictures, the activity is overlaid with the MRI images. The current standard of care is an equivalent dipole fit, which is a much more labor-intensive and manual method to fit a dipole to the activity that was flagged on the EEG. And so as comparison to the kurtosis beamformer, we showed here the locations of the equivalent dipole, equivalent current dipoles. And then the top row is the cryogenic MEG, on the bottom is the on-scalp MEG. The dipole, in this case, for reference, is the one that was fit to the cryo-MEG data. And so generally the activity locates in the same areas with both modalities or all three modalities. A lot of the patients that come through, though, have implanted vagus nerve stimulators. So this is a patient with a VNS. So we see a lot of artifacts because of these implemented stimulators, and we managed to still localize well, even in the case of these large artifacts. And so again, on the top is the cryogenic MEG data, on the bottom is the OPM MEG data. And then finally, we also localize sensory data, in this case, the somatosensory. It's a electric pulse to the right wrist of the patients, and then we localize the activity to the somatosensory cortex. And this was also one of the patients with the VNS stimulator. So the functional mapping works fairly well in those cases too, even though we have very large artifacts in the raw data. And so if we want to move this to usefulness for epilepsy, the question is, what are the next steps? What do we need to do? So for the last 15 years that we've been developing this uncooled technology, we've cross-validated it with cryogenic MEG in sensory paradigms, so such as the somatosensory or auditory paradigms. And so we need to continue doing this on a larger subject volume, and then do the same with the spike detection for epilepsy. So we're in the process of that right now. We have 23 patients, and we're starting to get to a point where we can do much more quantitative analysis, because we're starting to get statistics. We have looked into some suppression of artifacts, like the VNS, but also movement artifacts, because we want to move this to long-term measurements where the subject can move. We're in the process of regulatory, FDE, and medical CE. But then this method has really the potential of moving to even higher spatial resolutions than current MEG. And of course, it needs to be cross-validated, like where it could replace ECOG so implanted electrodes, and there's been some great starting to cross-validate by the group of Marseille here. So thank you. I want to close with this, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, and the floor is open for questions.
Hello, thank you. Can you please say a bit more about the recording setup? I mean, are they stuck in a special room at the OPM recordings? Or
Yeah.
are they free to move? Can you record for longer with OPMs?
Yeah.
Comfort reasons, or how does that work?
So we still need a shielded environment, just like MEG, because everything causes magnetic field artifacts. So we currently use the same types of rooms, but you could use a smaller shield looking more like an MRI for that too. These measurements were all made supine because that's the clinical paradigm we use, but that doesn't have to be the case. You can put these on the head and the subject could move. And I think that is the, if you want to do replacement of ECOG, you do need the long-term measurement. So the subject needs to be able to move within that room, within a contained environment, but is able to freely move around or sit on a bed or something like that. That is the idea, and so both that suppression of artifacts due to movement and getting higher spatial resolution, which I think is still possible, and a lot of theory studies have predicted that. We just need to show it and make it work. So I do think it has potential for long-term measurements.
This is very exciting. I think I could see usages beyond epilepsy. And my question is that, can you use a couple of your sensors and put it on animal models so we can do parallel, human and animal model, and that would be very interesting.
Yeah, we actually did one demonstration on rats, epileptic seizures in rats. You can, of course, not get a lot of sensors on those because they're still fairly bad compared to a rat. So I don't know what animal you're envisioning, but yes, there have been animal demonstrations as well.
I was thinking mice. Is it possible?
Yeah, I think it's similar to rats. So yes, it is possible. We've only managed to get 2 sensors on a rat, but we were able to measure the epileptic spikes both with internal electrodes and then also the non-invasive ones.
Quick question.
Sorry,
so
we have to move on in
Okay.
the rest of time.
You
Please.
can come see us at the poster in 1943, or we have a booth in the
Thank you.
exhibition area.
Thank